Now we're going to move on to our next speaker on stage 2. If you haven't yet replied in the chat what the time is where you're listening, it's right now 10 before 8 p.m. So 1950. No, 7:50, 7:50 p.m. In the Netherlands. So let us know what the time is at your end. Moving on, next speaker. He's a senior interaction and service designer at the Rockwool Foundation. I think that's the Rockwool Fonden, that would be Danish for the Rockwool Foundation. I asked him, what does taking a stand mean for you? And he said, investing in yourself, in changing something you don't think is right. At the end of this 20-minute talk, hopefully you'll have a different idea on what service design delivery can look like, what delivery frameworks can look like. And what I'm really interested in learning about from Anders Erlendsson, I hope I got that right, is how theater plays a role in this, because I think that's going to be a key part. So Anders, the stage is all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. And hello, everyone. My name is Anders Erlendsson, so very close, Mark. And I use he, him pronouns. I am doing this talk from my apartment in rainy Copenhagen, Denmark. And it's almost 8 o'clock, as you said, Mark, in the evening. And I've sent my wife and daughter away to the grandparents. So hopefully we will avoid too much background noise and distractions. But let me share my screen and let's get started. Then we are ready to go. So currently I'm working as senior social innovator and interaction designer in the Rockwool Foundation Intervention Unit, where we work in multidisciplinary teams to design human services for disconnected people in Denmark. In this presentation, we will explore 3 overall questions. What is a principle-based service? What's the potentials and implications of principles-based services? And why should we investigate this approach further? I will try to answer these questions by inviting you to explore our developmental journey of the unemployment service Nextwork. And I've tried to divide the journey into 3 chapters to make it easier for you guys to follow along. So chapter 1, we designed a service. Chapter 2, why did we fail? Chapter 3, redesigning the service delivery framework. And chapter 4, what did we learn? So let's get started and explore the developmental journey of Nextwork together. Way too many young people in Denmark ends up with no education and long-term unemployment. The consequences for these people are severe, and it's also extremely costly for the Danish welfare state. When we initiated the project, we witnessed a lot of great private and municipal initiatives trying to deal with this challenge in different ways. But we were also surprised to see how much money that had been invested trying to deal with this problem in the past decades. So despite the effort and investments, we could see how the same amount of young people ended up in disconnection every year, and how problems actually appeared to be reproducing themselves over and over again. So one of these young people was Lily. And Lily had been a familiar face in the job center over the past years after she dropped out of youth education. She was cycling in and out of municipal projects and started to see less and less people. When we met Lily, she didn't really see other people than her boyfriend, her caseworker, and occasionally her parents. After her dropout, Lily started to doubt if she would ever find her way to education or a permanent job. And the doubt only rose when she was diagnosed with social anxiety in the psychiatric system. So for a long time, Lily had been told that she had to get better before she could engage in other activities. And one quote I specifically remember was, "I don't know what I want to do, and I'm not really good at anything." So there was definitely a reason to act, and we really wanted to do something about it. So we ran a traditional service design process, we ran research activities, identified opportunities, generated ideas, prototyped the service ourselves, and we designed an education and onboarding program for a new team to take the work forward. And we named the service Next Work. The overall intention with the service was to allow young people to strengthen their work identity through internships in private companies, and by that discover meaningful paths to work or education. So basically what the service did was to facilitate networking between young people and private companies, for them to get to know each other both professionally and personally. And based on that, allow young people to decide themselves in what company they wanted to intern in. The service was about allowing young people to build up work identity in the internships and in network groups with other young people in internships. And finally, allow that work identity and work experience to guide the young people to permanent employment or further education. We designed concrete service elements and activities to strengthen the quality of which the service was delivered by the new team. We decide guidelines for how the team should run an event for young people and companies to meet each other, and a game for how to mediate a meaningful conversation between them. We designed a format for how the team should facilitate meaningful network groups for young people, and a voting system allowing the young people to actually decide in which company they wanted to work in. We tested the service ourselves through a live prototype for almost 6 months. And we could see how Lily realized that she was capable of many things, and how she prolonged her internship in a supermarket, how she got inspired by another young person from her network group who was interning in a daycare, and how that led to a new internship for Lily in another daycare. We saw how Lily was building up work identity and finally started education as a pedagogue. In other words, we thought the service was doing quite good. So based on our prototype, we created a service blueprint and a detailed manual with information about how to prepare and run all activities and service elements in Next Work. We designed and ran an ambitious education program for the group of people who were to continue delivering the Next Work service, the operational team. And still, we totally failed. But why did we fail? So, despite the best intentions of the new and very capable operational team, we realized that the service blueprint and service manual actually disabled them from doing the work. Whenever new and unforeseen challenges appeared and the team could not find meaningful guidelines in the blueprint or manual, they ended up falling back into the old logics and practices the service originally was designed to move away from. In our attempt to create the best, most intuitive and self-explanatory service delivery framework, we actually disabled the team to be creative and respond to new challenges whenever they occurred. We simply hadn't been thinking about how to enable the operational team to respond and further develop the service when there were changes in the situation that we're meeting. Another reason why we failed was that Next Work was built on a set of shifts that could not coexist with the existing logics and practices in the municipality. So we had been co-designing the service with a Danish municipality, so we knew for sure that the leadership bought into this transition. But we also discovered how new visions and strategies decided on a leadership level are impossible to achieve if those parts are impossible to achieve if those parts of this of the system that the new service interacts with, that's what I want to say, stay operating in the same way. So this could be structures or workflows, documentation formats, routines, IT systems, etc. And if we look a little deeper into these shifts, you could say very crudely that the system Lily had been cycling in and out of for so many years was built on the assumption that young people are not ready for work. And so the purpose obviously is to prepare them and prove their readiness. If we look at the power, the resources and relationships within the system, we see how young people feel pacified because internships are created through a brokering model and the support is provided one-to-one by professionals to help young people overcome their barriers. In Next Work, we wanted to shift these 4 keys purpose, power, resources, and relationships. So we believe that what young people need is to develop an identity as a working person. And you can only get that by experiencing yourself in work. So the purpose of Next Work is to build work identity through real life experiences and new relationships that reflect that identity back to you. The power is shifted to young people to decide themselves where to work. And if it doesn't work out, they simply move around the network to a new internship. We think of this as a transition and not a failure. And finally, the many-to-many relationships allows us to open up resources in small businesses where young people can build new networks. So the existing system, its logics and routines, they were super hard to change. And we could see how the Next Work operational team was falling back into business as usual, even though we had tried to design a strong scaffold of service activities and elements to avoid that. We witnessed how the operational team started to deliver one-to-one support rather than many-to-many, how young people were sent to rehab and had to fix individual problems before they could start interning, neglecting that the internship itself could be a way or motivation out of the problem. So Next Work was originally designed to create better outcomes for young people, but ended up being equally about changing systems. So, excuse me. The key learning from running the live prototype in our first attempt to implement and run the service was that the impact is not defined by how well the teams are able to deliver specific service activities or elements, but their ability to stay true to service principles when they have to respond to changes in the situation they are meeting. And this insight pointed to two questions for us to explore. How might we enable teams to stay true to the service principles when there are changes in the situation they're meeting? And how might we enable teams not to fall back into existing and dominant logics and practices? We realized how the blueprint could not answer these questions, and we decided to throw the script away. But we simply had to find a meaningful way to enable the team to work in this alternative way. And our response was to design an alternative service delivery framework. So rather than a service blueprint focusing on touch points, activities, elements, this service delivery framework consists of a set of principles that work as guiding stars or dogmas for how to navigate and respond when there are changes in the situation an operational team is meeting. So whatever they are inventing or changing, it has to stay true to the principles. It consists of an approach that enables the team to meet challenges in a structured way. It's about how to enable teams to invent rather than compromising. And in many ways, what we're trained to do as designers. A series of initial service elements or activities where the principles are put into practice. And finally, a support setup that must help teams not to fall back into dominant logics and practices the service intend to move away from. For us to design an alternative service delivery framework, we had to find answers to four questions. So what are the meaningful overall service principles to guide the team's work? What approach would allow the team to stay true to the service principles when they have to respond to changes in the situation they're meeting? And what are the elements that would put the principles into practice? And finally, what setup and support do teams need to not fall back into existing dominant logics and practices? So let's have a look at how we designed the service principles. So first of all, we developed a set of guidelines to help us design meaningful principles for Next Work. So a good principle should be simple and easy to communicate. A good principle should point to what you're moving towards, but also what you're leaving behind. And a good principle should create creative constraints for the operational team. And a good principle name should challenge the dominant vocabulary. So we looked at the service shifts, what we were leaving behind and moving towards, and we tried to identify the essence of the shifts and landed on these three principles. First of all, work identity rather than the personal development. Shift the power to the young people and companies instead of it being with the caseworkers. And finally, many to many instead of one-to-one relationships. So with the principles in place, let's look into how we designed an approach to enable the teams to stay true to the service principles when they have to respond to changes in the situation they're meeting. And Mark, now it's the time to pay attention if you're keen to know something about theater, because our response to enable the team to meet challenges in a structured way was to develop the devising approach. And the word devising comes from devised theater, where actors and scenographers, directors, etc., are co-designing the play through experimentation. So there is no script, and they keep experimenting to the very last day before the premiere. It's an approach or process that insists on inventing rather than compromising. It's about building capacity in operational teams and frontline workers, allowing them to respond strategically to changes in the situation they're meeting. It's about having a common language to reduce status, invite playfulness, and build intimacy. So we developed the devising loop to illustrate the approach, and one could argue that the illustration looks very much like a traditional design process. What's important to keep in mind is that the people running the service come from various backgrounds and disciplines, and typically don't have any experience working with design. In most cases, they've been working in different parts of the municipality, and they've been used to the system logics and practices that Nextwork wants to move away from. So devising is about building capacity in operational teams, but in a way where team members can contribute equally and develop a common team language for how to invent rather than compromise. So rather than there is one correct way of doing things in the traditional logics, there are multiple ways of achieving something in the devising logics. Rather than everyone believes that professional approach is better, then everyone seeks to find the best common expression of something. And rather than there is status in knowing what procedures to follow, there's status in daring and knowing how to improvise. Let's quick have a look at the service elements. So we refined the service elements we already had designed based on the principles. So the Nextwork events facilitated networking between many young people and many companies. Young People Networking Group was about real life experience to build up work identity. And the voting format ensured a shift in power. So young people themselves decided in what company they wanted to work in. And finally, let's have a look at how we went about constructing a meaningful service setup support. So the alternative service delivery framework also affects how we think about what setup and support that's needed. So rather than ensuring that service activities are delivered in a certain way, it's more about enabling the operational teams in different municipalities to support each other in maintaining the quality of the service. Our way of meeting this is to run a central Nextwork hub that facilitates ongoing support, cross-municipal developmental networks, cross-municipal conferences, local supervision, focusing only on principles and devising. So the Nextwork Central Hub enables knowledge sharing, continuous development, shared language and identity, professional relationship, mutual support to stay true to the service principle, and a shared mission to change the system. So that was my attempt to invite you into how we concretely went about designing an alternative service delivery framework. But let's just zoom out for a bit and ask, what did we learn from trying this? So first of all, there's a shift in how we think about impact. In the blueprint-based version, delivering and executing the service blueprint is what creates impact. Activities, structures, elements are fixed and must not be changed. And the service operates in the same way everywhere. In the principle-based approach, the quality of which the team is able to deliver the service principle is what creates impact. Activities, structures, elements can have multiple expressions as long as they're grounded in the same principles. And the service is transformative and dynamic. So why should we throw the script away? And how does the alternative service delivery framework support that? So the principles work as roadblocks for not falling back into dominating logics and practices we want to move away from. The approach makes the service more responsive because employees are trained to invent rather than compromising. It allows the operational teams to develop and share mutual language that supports the system change. The elements create a foundation and starting point for how operational team can put the principles into action. And finally, the support setup maintains high quality service delivery through the exchange of knowledge and experiences between municipal teams that also support system change. Why is it difficult to throw the script away and run principle-based services? So there is buy-in from leadership to implement shifts, but in this case, and we often meet that there's a pushback from other department structures, routines, IT systems, and so on. And the operational team is typically a small fish in a big municipality and requires a different support system to not be swallowed. Finally, it requires the operational teams to think and work in a different way. It's equally about learning, but also unlearning. Why should we investigate this approach further? So first of all, it's difficult to scale people-driven services and shift systems at the same time. I guess a lot of us are familiar with that. And we believe that the principle-based approach demonstrates potential for how to scale transformative services. And finally, which I'm super intrigued about, is that the principle approach is a mean, and especially the devising mark, is a mean to unleashing the creativity of frontline staff. So that was all for now. I hope it made sense and can work as inspiration to some of you. And you're more than welcome to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders. And definitely people want to reach out to you because I saw some questions coming by on where's the project right now. Maybe we'll get into that during the Q&A, but thank you for sharing that. And I definitely do believe in the power of theater and that we can learn a few more things about it. And I know that there are some other people in the service design space who have the same vision. Anders, stay around for the Q&A, which is coming up after this next talk. Thank you so much for now.